And okay, yeah, now we're live.
Go.
We're live.
Yeah, so this is a hangout, not like a regularly scheduled one or anything. I mostly did this one because I wanted to get like all of our stuff about the Vegas shooting. Well, hang on, I'm hearing myself.
Sorry, that was me.
Yeah,
that was me, Shane.
Yeah. Also, I opened up a separate tab to watch it just so I can read the comments.
Yeah.
So
all right. You know that thing where you call a radio show and you have to turn your radio off?
Yeah. Okay.
See, I'm getting myself again. Who's doing that?
It wasn't me this time.
I'm muted, so don't look at me.
I use headphones.
Yeah, I turned my mic off, so.
Yeah, see, I'm still hearing myself.
Maybe it's your mic.
Maybe you have schizophrenia and you don't realize it.
All right, so anyway. Yeah, I'm still hearing myself.
Like an echo?
Okay, so it's not me.
No, it's like several seconds delayed. I don't know what's going on.
Oh.
Do you have a way to mute everyone? That way you can de facto find
No,
out
because
whether...
my control room is not working. Hang on, now everything's stopped. All right. Okay. I'm just going to go for it.
Okay.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone.
All right. So like I was saying, I did this so that we can go ahead and talk about the Vegas shooting and get it out of the way so we don't have to take up podcast time discussing it. And I don't really know what we can, say about, how many times can you cover a mass shooting? We're going to say, it's a big tragedy. Our hearts go out to the loved ones of those who died, as they do. 59 at the last count and 489 injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And primarily what I thought we'd do, we can talk about whatever aspects you guys want, but I've kind of got a list of scumbags. I've got, because every time there's something like this, bodies are still hitting the floor and people are all coming out with their, this is,
I'll give you a hint, people. One of the scumbags, her name rhymes with Millerly Lincoln.
Hillary Clinton.
But of course, you've got the Alex Jones people talking about, false flag. And it's like, shut up.
Yeah.
I hate false flags accusations.
Although, speaking of which, you should see the Wikipedia article on the Vegas article. It was so cringeworthy because in the controversies, it was saying only right wingers were proposing conspiracy theories, and I'm saying they're completely ignoring all the conspiracies that leftists have said about it.
Yeah, I think I've got a good mix of people on the left and the right.
Yeah, Wikipedia is no longer the reliable site it used to be.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's a core of editors that just have this big political bias and they're trying to drive the site in that direction. But
yeah,
I don't know. It just seems like over the years it's gotten more and more like that.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened almost immediately is fake screenshots going around. Some of them saying, "Oh, this shooter was a liberal anti-Trump," and others were saying he's a conservative pro-Trump, and his own family said he was politically unaffiliated. So both sides are scum there.
And according to ISIS, 5 minutes before the shooting, he converted to Islam and did it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Well, we knew they were scum anyway. That probably goes without saying.
Yeah.
So what's the theory on motive at this point? What do people think is happening here?
I don't think we have any information on that.
We don't have it.
Although I think, Chris, you were telling me just before we went live that they found a suicide note.
Yeah, they found a suicide note, and they did find out that he was a habitual gambler and he was on some antidepressants. So there might have been a psychological motive for it, but
sorry, guys.
Yeah. I don't know if he had just gambled too much and got so far in debt that he didn't feel he could claw his way out. I don't know.
And it's pretty funny because some people are saying, well, that's very implausible because he had a lot of money. It's like, you'd be surprised how fast some millionaires can lose their money.
Oh, yeah. You can spend $1 million. I hear music when there's no one there.
Sorry. I'll go close the door. Sit tight. I'll be right back.
Okay, yeah, we've got the random audio coming through again.
Yeah, sorry about that, people.
All right. And one thing that I thought was really disgusting was when I saw links that were people saying, oh, you know, this is my cousin, this is my boyfriend, this is so on. He's in Vegas. I haven't heard from them. And people have found out that they were like celebrities or other just random images from the net of people who weren't even there.
Yeah.
It's like, what, are you just trying to get attention or something?
Yeah.
You do know there's this thing called a reverse image search.
Yep.
I thought tragedy was supposed to bring people together.
But now it's dividing us even more.
No, for the most part it does. I mean, if you look at how many people, when they could have just ran to safety, helped injured people get away, you know, you've got the outpouring of people, you got people giving blood, you know.
What's the reverse image search thing?
If you go to Google Images, there's in the search bar, there's a little picture of a camera, and you can either upload a picture or give it a URL to a picture, and it will show you all the places online where that picture and similar pictures are.
Yep. Little off topic, but if you're gonna give online dating a try, you got to learn how to use reverse search.
Yep.
I can't.
She works for this, you know, supermodel agency. Hey, she also works for Corbis. Hey, she also works for.
Yeah.
Isn't that called catfishing?
Yep.
Wasn't that a show on MTV?
It's a common trick they do on dating sites. You know, they tell you they're this really nice person and they're for a modeling agency, but in order to go on a date with them, you got to pay them a fee. So.
Yeah.
It's a trap. Get an X.
Yeah.
Or you do like Ashley Madison and make them pay a fee to delete your account.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, in case anyone's wondering, currently I'm drinking Arizona Mucho Mango.
Oh, that shit's delicious.
Just thought I'd give you guys a heads up. But anyway,
you're not making it into drugs, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm eating it for the vitamin C.
Has it been too much time? Have people forgotten the whole Trayvon Martin thing?
Well, once that other guy got shot, everyone forgot about Trayvon Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Brown, I think his name is.
Yeah. That's,
actually,
again,
you'd be surprised.
And this kind of relates to Vegas, but that's another thing that disgusts me about a lot of those Black Lives Matter is, like, you know, when a black kid gets killed or injured, you know, they make a big deal about it, but then when later another black kid gets killed, they're like, oh, forget about the previous one, let's go to this one. It's like, do you actually care about people getting killed, or are you only caring about your agenda? Because it sounds more like you're caring about your agenda.
Here's the weird thing about Black Lives Matter. They're going on and on about unaccountable police shooting young black people, and yet they only want the police to have guns. Yeah, that yeah.
The irony
and I've actually heard from one person say, well, I actually saw one person who flat out said, you know, they felt that only people who are part of, like, the Neo Black Panthers or Black Lives Matter should be allowed to own guns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The irony that Chris said is so palpable. I think I just got mentally sick.
Yeah, and this is a little off topic again, but going back to the whole thing, there's a new Wolfenstein game coming out called Wolfenstein New Colossus, and it's a sequel to the really ludicrous, you know, New Order, which says that the Nazis could have won the war if would have taken over the world if they won the war. Hint, hint, they wouldn't have. And in there, it's mentioned that blacks are targeted and they're dubbed as inferior race. But as a guy who studies World War II history as a knowledge, I know from firsthand from their actual written laws, blacks were actually treated better than Jews and other groups.
Wow.
Yeah. Blacks from what I can gather, blacks in Nazi Germany, basically it was kind of sort of like what we did in the South, only, believe it or not, they didn't have lynch mobs for blacks or anything. It was just more of, you can live in Germany, but don't marry a white Germanic person and we'll be all cool. Oh. That's basically what it was. And if anything, if the Nazis did take over America, they would actually form an all-black militia and use the whole, well, white people have been suppressing you, so we'll give you guns, and your job is to go around and beat up American resistance fighters because they're a bunch of racist Klansmen.
Wow.
They did that in Latvia and Lithuania, even though those people were considered racially inferior because Latvians and the Lithuanians were pissed off at Russia for annexing them, 10 years prior to World War II. So they told them, here's some guns, just track down any communists and anti-Nazis, and we'll be cool.
Wow,
You're talking about race. You're a racist.
Man, I didn't know Marxism had its roots in Nazism. Well, I'm not surprised by that.
Oh yeah, what do you think Nazi stands for?
National Socialism.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's Marxism.
And guess what? Even though Hitler in public condemned Marxism in private, he actually said that Karl Marx, while he disagreed with him, was a pretty decent philosopher.
I don't think they ever actually condemned Marx, because there's a lot of writings from the Nazis about praising and including Hitler's speeches, saying that he had the right ideas.
Oh yeah,
I think you might be confusing with him going after communists, which is a different thing.
Yeah, he went after communists and Bolsheviks really hard because he believed they had gotten Marx completely wrong.
What are we talking about again?
Is that why Hitler? Is that why Hitler considered to be far right wing by today's standards?
Yeah, that's the only reason. You ask people, well, how was Hitler right wing? Well, he was pro-war and he was racist and he hated communists.
I've heard people try and claim that Hitler was a capitalist. It's like, no.
Fun fact.
Well, there was nothing capitalist about him, though.
Fun fact, George Orwell, who a lot of Marxists love, he was anti-communist.
Well, it's state capitalism,
Yeah. All right, getting back to Vegas and our list of scumbags, this one actually kind of relates Riley Dennis and a whole bunch of other people. I don't know if Riley got it kicked off or what, but they tweeted with the hashtag ban all white men.
Riley did what?
Yep, tweeted with the hashtag ban all white men, and the hashtag trended.
I've heard that.
And of course, when he was called out on it, he was just... Joke, guys, why can't you take a joke?
But there was no emoji, there was no funny meme along with it, no hint that it was a joke, and it was all like, oh, well, why did you think I wanted to ban all white men? Because you said you wanted to ban all white men?
Not to mention, considering the fact that groups like Black Lives Matter, they have flat out said multiple times that they need to bring back segregation, no joke. It doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
Black spaces.
Yeah, blacks are saying, oh, white people are so evil and racist, we have to bring back segregation so we can protect these sweet little black snowballs from the evil white man. Yeah,
well, you gotta remember, Chris, they was Kangs.
Yeah,
I had to roast her with
Let's not get into that. That's
we was Kangs, and we built society. Even though we have evidence that shows that the Egyptians were actually sort of a mixed race,
Now then.
Yeah, they were kind of part
Mediterranean, go ahead.
Part African, things like that. Yeah, they were kind of all mixed up.
Yeah, they were a mixed race. They weren't all black. Yeah.
By the way, just so everyone knows, these scumbags are just kind of in the order I want to cover them, not severity. So I don't want Riley to think she's any less of a scumbag than the other people we're going to talk about.
Are you going to mention Richard Dawkins?
No. What did Dawkins do?
I saw a tweet. Of Richard Dawkins saying something stupid about gun control. I forgot what the tweet was. I'm gonna look it up.
There's a whole universe of those.
The sad thing about that's the sad thing about Dawkins. He's such a smart guy when it comes to debunking religion, but when it comes to politics, he's totally out for lunch.
Yeah.
He's not as bad as some of the others, but I do remember there was an interview one time where he criticized libertarians because he felt that they were pushing their views on other people.
That's funny.
Yeah.
We want to take over the government, leave you alone, huh?
Yeah.
And by the way, a lot of this misinformation I'm getting from Snopes. I'm including a link to Snopes' tag for Las Vegas, which they don't have a tag specifically for the Las Vegas shooting, so earlier ones are just about, but the last few were about it. And I do want to say there is one they included that I don't think they're scumbags. I think they were just people who are sloppy. But there's like this conspiracy theory, like, oh, this Stephen Paddock character, the guy who did it, he died in 2013, and here's the obituary. Well, yeah, but it's a different Stephen Paddock.
Yeah, that's kind of...
Fell off the flat Earth.
He has a different middle name, a different father's name, so it's a different guy.
Yeah, people. It is completely possible for people to have same first name and same last name. They are completely unrelated by pure coincidence.
All right, so let's go on to my next one then. You probably heard of this one. CBS executive Haley Geftman Gold.
Oh, yeah. Her.
Oh, yeah.
The one that just a little spoiler, people. CBS, for once in their lifetime, did the right thing and fired her.
Yeah, pretty much like within nanoseconds.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah.
Hang on, this page is anyone having trouble with the latest couple of versions of Chrome being slower?
I'm using Safari. What do you want from me?
This is the first time I've opened Chrome in forever.
I have to use my
them.
laptop for Hangouts, so...
We're going to install Netscape.
Here's what she said. Here's what she said, quote, "If they wouldn't do anything when children were murdered, I have no hope that the Repugs will ever do the right thing. I'm actually not even sympathetic because country music fans often are Republican gun toters."
Way to poison the well, Haley.
Oh,
Got
yeah.
to do with the price of mutton.
Oh, yeah. And again, everyone's blaming the NRA, even though the NRA, from what I can gather, hasn't really responded to anything yet, you know.
Well, I got some things to say about them a little later, but...
Yeah, but...
Also,
this doesn't have to do with Vegas, but it does have to do with another famous shooting, the Columbine shooting. You know, I remember... You know, hearing documentaries about when Columbine occurred, everyone was blaming the NRA, and you know what the NRA did? They canceled almost all their meetings out of respect, except for that one, but they couldn't cancel because of a law, and they actually donated a lot of money to the local fire and police departments in that area.
That is actually kind of cool. Oh, hey.
Yeah, so... And here's what I want to ask that lady. So you're ranting on quote-unquote Republicans for causing this. Well, what did you do?
Yeah.
What did you do?
I've heard
she called for gun control.
I've heard the Gun Owners of America is much better than the NRA.
Yeah, they're much better because they don't negotiate. The NRA, they're shill-outs at times with the Republican Party, and if the Republican Party says, we support your right to own guns, but we do agree there should be, like, you know, some limits, the NRA goes, okay, that's reasonable. The Gun Owners of America, nope, they don't negotiate.
Well, and they don't do the thing that NRA does. Well, we just need to enforce the ones that already exist. Gun Owners of America is like, no, of course not. Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
right. I found the Richard Dawson tweet. He said, "Darn tootin' great shooting, cool dude, certain he's Second Amendment rights."
Shame.
Hell yeah! Every country has psychopaths. Even the U.S. they have guns.
Oh yeah, I've heard that all the time. Like I cannot tell you how many times I hear people say, "Well, why should we defend psychopathic killers?" Because by your definition, when they go out shooting people, they're just enforcing their rights. No, they're not.
Yeah, no one ever said there was a right to shoot up a bunch of people.
Yeah, you know, it doesn't say, the Second Amendment does not say you have the right to own guns and shoot them. It's your right to own a gun shall not be infringed. What part do people not get that?
How do you stop a criminal from getting a gun by passing a law anyway?
Everyone can't even keep drugs out of their own prisons.
I tell that to people all the time. We know prohibition.
We know prohibition.
We know it doesn't work with drugs. We know it doesn't work with things like poaching. Why the fuck do people think it's going to work with guns?
Because it worked in Australia, apparently, even though it didn't. Because I've lived there and I know what goes on there.
Fee just actually posted a good article about that. And for support, they were using people like the American Medical Association, who are very pro-gun control. But, I mean, even they're saying, that 96, that didn't really do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just compare it to New Zealand, and it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I will say one thing. I mean, this may be a little sick to say, but one thing that is good about mass shootings is that they prove to these leftists and all that prove that gun control don't work. I mean, a perfect example is in 1994, they passed the assault weapons ban. What happened 3 years later? Two nutjobs shot up the North Hollywood Bank, and all their guns, violated the 1994 Weapons Act. It's like...
Doesn't surprise me that this has come up, which is part of the reason.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know, people are asking, you know, people are asking, you know, I mean, how many mass shootings how many children have to die before we pass gun control? I'm saying, how many people have to die before you guys finally realize you can't stop psychopathic criminals with laws, and the best way to protect people from mass shooters is to let them arm themselves, so if they are unfortunate enough to be in that situation, they can at least stand a chance of defending themselves.
How would we deal with Stephen Paddock, considering he was way up on the 32nd floor? Like, I know a handgun certainly could have taken him out.
I mean, that's the thing about it. There probably isn't a whole lot you can do, and that doesn't make for a good political stump speech. But
well, yeah, there could be someone else in the hotel or hotel security.
Well, yeah,
apparently hotel security heard what he was up to, and they had to call the police because apparently they weren't armed.
Yeah, you know, again, you know, an armed person could have, you know, got to his hotel room. I mean, that happened, Shane, like with one school shooting. You know, there was one guy, I forgot his name. He saw there was a school shooting going on in the news. He grabbed his 45 caliber pistol and a shotgun, and he stopped the shooter. He drove
there's a
there.
bunch of stories like that. Yeah,
he drove
I'd love
there
to see a list of
the only reason I don't know the one you're talking about is because there could be several that fit that description. I've read a bunch of them.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, that's
I agree with Pipsqueak on that one. They don't make the news at all.
And here's
I wonder why.
Make local news like as a little footnote, but they don't talk about it on The View.
Yeah.
Gee, I wonder why.
And of course, people are pulling the perfect example, saying people don't need machine guns to protect themselves. We've got the police.
Well, the police will only outline your body in chalk.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have any Norwegians here, but I have a couple Norwegian gaming buddies, and they have actually said the perfect argument against the whole thing. Well, the police can take care of mass shooters attacks. You know, that guy Anders Breivik, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name, he was on that island literally just target shooting children, and there were children who were calling, crying, begging for police, saying, look, there's a crazy guy on the island, send someone here. And the Delta team, which is the Norwegian SWAT team, you know, told their supervisors, look, you know, because he set up a bomb earlier, look, there's no more bombs in Oslo. We need to get to that island to stop them. And they're like, and the politicians were like, no, there might be more terrorists here. We need you to protect us. And by the time they finally were able to get on that island, Breivik had surrendered, and 77 kids were dead.
Wow.
Yeah, who has the moral high ground here?
So going on to the next one, then, CBS News, we just kind of praised them for firing that stupid exec, but then they kind of turned around and pooched it when they claimed that Stephen Paddock had AR-15s that fired automatic rounds.
No.
Automatic rounds?
No.
What the heck are automatic rounds?
That's what I want to know, Shade.
Do any gun control people know anything about guns?
Oh, that kind of
bring up the term assault clips.
You know what this actually reminds me of, guys? This reminds me of and this kind of goes back to the North Hollywood shootout, because they said this about them, is when they say, oh, and the guy was shooting armor-piercing ammunition, even though you can't buy armor-piercing ammo, and they said, but they had armor-piercing bullets because they could penetrate police cars. Police cars can easily be penetrated. Same thing with police vests.
Yeah. Stop getting your information from the movies. Cars are not bulletproof.
Yep. Same thing with police vests. You know, there's many police officers that do tell people, look, you know, our police vests mostly protect against things like knife attacks, and at a certain distance they can protect us from stun rounds, but a 9mm just
carriers. They're anti-stab vests or stab-resistant vests.
Well, and really, protecting you from a bullet just means that if a trauma team gets to you quickly enough, they've got a better chance of saving you than if you get shot without one.
Yeah,
but I mean, you're still knocked down. You're still down for the count.
Yeah, and it'll still break your ribs as well.
Yeah, you know, that's what another guy said. You know, I mean, he said, yeah, our bulletproof vest can stop a 12-gauge shotgun round, but we're still going to feel the impact. It's still going to injure us, and it's still going to be nasty, you know. And not to mention another thing they point out: bulletproof vests can only take so much hits before eventually they get worn out and you break through them.
And then they're like silencers. If he had a silencer, no one would hear his gun.
Oh God!
Fun fact. And here's another thing, because I'm a weapons collector and I know a thing or two about guns. A silencer would actually make them less deadly. Why? Because silencers silencers lower the velocity and the distance of the round, so therefore he would have
only certain
range.
ones do. Only if it has a rubber seal inside, which actually contacts the bullet itself.
Yeah.
Well, if we're talking about silencers, then we should probably talk about Hillary. Another scumbag.
Yeah.
This is the one I've been waiting for.
Yeah, she didn't waste any time at all to say, and the hang on. God,
No,
being
I
so
can do a
slow.
better condescending voice, Shane.
But she was basically saying, no, the NRA wants people to be able to buy silencers. Imagine the carnage.
Funny you mentioned that, actually, because that's completely legal here.
Guys,
even though it was confirmed that he even though it was confirmed he was using supersonic ammo, and silencers do nothing to silence supersonic ammo because there's still that sonic boom.
Well, that's what I was hearing from. I haven't watched the video. I just can't bring myself to. But people whose opinion on guns I trust, listen to them. They said that bang you're hearing, that's not the gunshot. That's the sonic boom from the bullets as they go by. A silencer isn't going to do anything about that.
I actually watched the video. The gunfire was already quieter than the cracks from the supersonic ammunition.
Oh yeah, because that's right there, where it's going by. Here's a myth about sonic booms. There's kind of a myth that you get the sonic boom when you break the speed of sound, but not after. No, that's not true. It keeps making the sonic boom. As long as it's supersonic, it'll keep making it.
Yep.
Yeah, the boom is just when it goes past us.
Yeah, that's the reason why with a lot of those guns, they often go crack, boom. That.
There's no sound wave passes you. You hear it.
Yeah. Like that. That's just that's the bullet. That's the bullet. Creating the sonic boom until it hits the target or slows down.
Right. But I mean, the same is true of fighter jets, because fighter jets talk about, the fighter pilots talk about, the sonic boom when they break the speed of sound. Well, they keep doing it. As long as the jet's going faster than the speed of sound, it's going to keep making that sonic boom.
Yeah, it's like a conical wake.
Well, a fighter pilot wouldn't hear the sonic boom after he's broken the speed of sound because the pilot is in front of the pressure wave.
Yeah, and as you pointed out,
he's outrunning it.
And as Lord Killian, really cool guy, Shane, Lord Killian. We got to get him on the podcast one day. But as Lord Killian pointed out, that a silencer, even though it does suppress the sound, it doesn't suppress it by much. And a silenced AR-15 is still louder than a rock and roll concert.
Yeah, I brought this up with a few friends when I was having a discussion. Like, the quietest firearm I know of is the British well rod. It was a silenced suppressed pistol. Made by the British for use by SOE Commando, and it was also given the French resistance.
And it was also quite because
regular conversation is 60 decibels. It made 73 decibels. That was how loud that thing was.
That's actually pretty low, actually.
Yeah. It's really impressive that it got it down, but it's still louder than normal conversation.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Here's
the thing, though. Were the rounds subsonic?
Yeah, 45. It was 45 ACT and 45 ACC. He's pretty slow.
See, the whole thing about shooting a bunch of people from a distance like that, subsonic rounds are not going to do it for you in that situation.
Don't suppressors melt under full auto fire?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, that's another thing that a lot of movies and video games fail to realize, is that suppressors, if you shoot them for long enough periods of time, eventually they burn and they get hot and they reach the point where they can't be used anymore.
Well, because there's a lot of delicate baffles in there. It's not like this big solid cylinder of metal.
Yeah.
It's got all these little chambers.
It's so hilarious when a lot of movies and video games portray the silencer as making a sound, when in real life they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't make it sound like a laser gun.
Dang it.
But Hillary says this, and yet the big news is Trump tossing paper towels to hurricane victims.
Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am about to go nuclear on Hillary.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right, Hillary. First things first. You're not Madam President of the United States. Trump is our current God Emperor.
Thank God.
Take the red eye out of this thing the same way I managed to take the red eye out of putting up with you. Second, where were you when the Las Vegas shooting happened? Clearly not deleting those 3,000 emails. Third, how many people did you assassinate or have one of your goons assassinate you with a silencer? And fourth, does that mean we have to ban silencers now? I mean, Jesus.
That's exactly what he wants to do.
The police only get silencers.
Yeah.
And bump stock.
I mean, it's crazy enough
Hillary's mouth
because
needs
you
a
have to pay
silencer.
like a $200 tax per silencer that you buy, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
Jeez, I thought they were expensive over here.
And even although I need to buy a silencer so I can put it on Hillary Clinton's mouth.
The silencer's not going to work on that thing, Chris. She's going to run her mouth all freaking
Hillary
day.
Clinton, just a little bit. Has anyone read her newest book? A lot of people have said it's so cringeworthy. All it is her going, "Where I was going to be president, but then the big Russian meanies cost it to me."
Does anyone know if
I can do a better Whitey impression than you.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, I had to clear the throat.
I like
Okay, that's a little too good there. Well, never do that again.
Okay. I'll take that as a compliment, Shane.
But that's all Hillary is. Like, she's blaming everything. She says, "Oh, it was those Russians who hired a secret smear campaign against me. It was Bernie Sanders because he stole votes from me. It was the racists who stole old votes away from me." Yeah, she's blaming everyone but herself.
She didn't really run a good campaign anyway.
And not to mention, she's flat out, the thing I think that really cost her the election was when she gave that speech about what to do with Syria, and people, and like the guys were saying, "But Hillary, if we do that, we risk a war with Russia." And she pretty much said, "Oh, well, if Russia comes, then we'll go to war with them."
We came, we saw, when we die.
Yep.
But I mean, all this thing about blaming the NRA, she's going on about how it's the NRA and there's this horrible lobby. The NRA, compared to others, really doesn't give that much to political lobbying.
I love it when people say, "Did you know the NRA $9 to the Republican Party?" Oh yeah, and compare that to the hundreds of millions of dollars a lot of lawyers give to the Democrats.
Yeah, I'm including a link to their
money out of politics, except ours. Ours is okay.
Yeah, I'm including a link to their opensecrets.org page. They contributed just over $1 million to candidates in 2016, just over $3 million in lobbying, and $54 million in outside spending. They were outspent in contributions by the American Federation of Teachers. They were outspent by an order of magnitude by Soros Fund Management. You never hear about those. You hear about the Koch brothers, but you never hear about Soros.
That's because he's like the Emperor Palpatine of lobbying.
But it's my side.
Yeah. And hold on. The numbers I gave you were just what they gave to Hillary. So that NRA's total giving versus just what they gave to Hillary, all total, the AFT spent 32 times as much as the NRA on political contributions, and total political spending in 2016 was over $100 million.
Maybe you should.
Oh, Shane, you know what? I wish Ouija boards were legitimate and they work, because I need to contact the spirit of Charlton Heston and make him tell everyone how stupid we are.
I was about to say the exact same thing, Chris.
Yeah. I hate it when people... Oh, sorry, Shane.
No, go ahead.
I was about to say, I despise it when the way Michael Moore portrayed him in his movie Bowling for Columbine, because you don't touch Charlton Heston. That guy, sorry, left-wing college students, he did much more to promote humanity in the Civil Rights Movement than you ever did.
Yep.
Yeah. And all you guys do is drink Starbucks and listen to your gender studies teachers.
Yeah.
And I like Starbucks myself, mind you.
Yeah, people. Charlton Heston, you read about how blacks were getting ketchup thrown at them because they refused, to move their tables. Charlton Heston was sitting alongside with them when they did that. He said that in a speech. He was like, when I was a young man, I was marching alongside Martin Luther King. I was sitting next to blacks in their protests when they were protesting, the segregated seatings. Yet because I flat out say that black and white should politically be treated as equals and not be given any special favors, I'm called a racist.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
the only way to not be racist is to treat the races differently.
Yeah. As Morgan Freeman said, the best way to fight racism is you stop viewing me as a black man, and I'll stop seeing you as a white man.
Yep.
Okay, now you guys are just being crazy, because that's all people view each other nowadays. It's current year, people.
Yeah.
All right, I got one more scumbag I want to cover. This is a name I don't think we've heard in a while, Piers Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
Piers Morgan. Oh, wait.
Where did you dredge that name up from?
Quote, if a Muslim terrorist had committed this Vegas atrocity, we'd have a slew of new laws in a heartbeat. But because it's an old white guy with guns, nothing will happen.
Piers, you do realize that the law that Trump proposed, to quote unquote prevent Islamic terrorists, they were all put down.
And also, Pulse nightclub.
Having a buffer zone, by the way.
Seriously. I mean,
that whole long thing I wrote, that whole long thing I read out, that is the title of his article. Yo, Piers, ever heard brevity is the soul of wit?
Yeah.
Here's a tip. If they can't fit in the tweet, it's probably too long to be a headline.
I missed how he got fired from CNN. What did he do to make that happen?
Alex Jones happened.
Yeah, he was saying a bunch of crap, and then thankfully, shortly, it basically happened after the Newtown attack, after he got owned by a whole bunch of people. In particular, you should have seen his interview with the Gun Owners of America president. He was a lot better than Alex Jones, because he was going on saying, "Yeah, really stupid man," that, and all this rants, and the Gun Owner of America guy, he was being really calm, and he's like, "Sir, I think you're acting crazy right now," Yeah, he had the best argument ever, like when he was saying, about how gun laws won't end mass shootings, Piers Morgan was like, you're a really stupid man, that, right? And he replied, and I think you're morally obtuse.
And Listen to this guy, quote, the NRA,
here's a funny thing.
A vile organization with a sinister, deadly grip on America's lawmakers, bought Trump's silence when they backed him during the election campaign with their whole $1 million that didn't even all go to him.
Yeah, it's just... Johnny, if you're going to have a meltdown, turn off your mic.
I'm aiming it at Piers, Chris.
Yeah, I know.
Here's his reasoning. Here's his speculation as to why Stephen Paddock did this. Quote, I suspect Stephen Paddock just fancied being a celebrity. He was getting old, getting bored, and liked the idea of his name and face becoming world famous. So he rented a hotel room, stockpiled it with 19 guns, bided his time, and waited until there were thousands of innocent men, women, and children below him. Then he aimed his rifle and began shooting bullet after bullet, fast and furious. The horrific videos from the scene posted on social media looked like something out of Call of Duty. Other countries have crazy people like Paddock, but they can't get their hands on the guns to execute their plans.
Hint, hint, Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah.
And Paul.
I will say, as tragic as those terrorist attacks in France were, they did make me kind of laugh a little bit, because there were all these, pro-guns who were saying, "Look at Europe, we have no gun rights, and we're all peaceful, loving. Holy crap! A bunch of Islamic terrorists just used machine guns to kill a bunch of people." Well, I just love seeing how baffled they were trying to justify their laws. It's like, well, this is why we need more gun laws, but we already have the strictest gun laws in the world. I've got nothing.
Yeah, but Edmonton, Cambrils, Barcelona, Charlotte. Cars don't kill people. Oh wait.
Yeah.
Oh
yeah. And yeah, posted that video earlier today. Every time we point out, did you know that cars kill more people than guns? Like, they're designed to kill.
And props.
I just uploaded the video on that earlier.
I know. I mentioned that. Yeah, and oh yeah. Try telling that to that one guy in Leon. I think it wasn't Leon. It was Nice. And he and he was driving that semi truck in those crowd of people. Yeah, that totally.
That's happened several times. There've been several places, in Europe and China, and I think Australia one time, where just a guy just drove into the crowd.
We've actually had a second one in Australia. Not nearly as deadly, because someone stopped it by throwing a bicycle at him.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Yeah.
They actually
Now that's Australians for you.
Yeah.
You Aussies are freaking nuts. I should really
And
play a
Pops,
trip
you-
there.
The guy was trying to drive his car up onto footpaths and things in one bicycle. So,
Yeah.
you know, screw this and screw him and just
Well,
ditch his bicycle at the windscreen.
Australians have to be. Well, Australians have to be nuts. They live in a land where there's more venomous creatures than people. So.
And props to you, Shane, for making that video about guns designed to kill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
All the
something
gun
that's
is
been on my
designed
mind
to
for a
do
while.
is propel a projectile at high speed by use of chemical combustion.
Yeah.
Any effect other than that is purely because of the intention of the user.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
that's not even the effect. The effect is they have the capacity to do that.
Yeah.
And therefore, you know, you can have a deterrent to someone if someone tries to rob you, but they know you've got a gun, they're probably not going to try.
Hard
Not to
candy
mention,
is clearly a baby
not to
killer
mention,
machine.
mass stabbings do occur. Yeah, a lot of people think they don't occur. They do.
Yep.
No,
Happen
they
all
do.
the time. They happen all the time. And that's another thing I've actually heard, Shane. I've actually heard from some of my European friends that, contrary to what a lot of news media like to say, there actually is a lot of gun violence in Europe. The news media just doesn't really talk about it, especially if you don't live in Europe.
Gotta ban latex balloons. They're killing machines.
Yeah.
Does anyone have an accurate number on how many gun deaths there are in the UK? Because I've heard from low as 35 to as high as 1,000.
Yeah.
There's got to be more
it
than
depends
that.
on how you
Well,
measure it.
Well, Shane's pointed this out. The problem with, and this is why we can't do cross-cultural comparisons, is because a lot of European countries, especially the UK, they handle situations there a lot differently than the United States. Because, as Shane pointed out in his video, in the US, we report crimes based on arrest, whereas they don't actually record down the crime until everything's been resolved and there's been a conviction or not guilty plea. So.
Well, it's not only that. Sometimes they will record gun violence as gang violence, so it won't actually show up in the statistics. I know that's what they do in Australia.
That's another thing too. That's another thing too. Some European nations, they don't actually write it down as a gun violence. They just write it as something else. You know. Oh, it's pretty funny. I actually saw this one user who tried to say that the Second Amendment is the reason why America imprisons more people than Russia.
The Second Amendment and not the war on drugs or anything like that?
Yeah. Actually, one person pointed that out. It's like no, it's a combination of the war on drugs and the fact that the United States has 20 different, has 20,000 different rules and regulations, each of which sometimes contradict each other. And if you break even one of them, you're automatically going to jail.
Yeah. I think we talked about this in that one episode of the Bıᴛᴇᴏ podcast. You remember that, Shane?
Yeah. We probably did. They all
wish Daniel was here, because then we'd do an idiot extraordinaire contest.
Yeah, whereas versus and going back, because he compared the United States to Russia. You see, whereas in Russia, the reason why they don't.
I think we broke Chris.
Their rules are simple.
Oh, never mind.
You only have to do 4 things in Russia to prevent terrorism: don't rob, don't rape, don't murder, and don't criticize Putin.
Chris, you're speaking so fast you're overloading your internet and it's not making it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Did you hear what I said?
You're just cutting out. Yeah, we heard enough of it, I think.
Yeah. Don't you criticize Comrade Putin. Yeah.
Otherwise, your internet might overload.
Every time this happens, like they come out and say that, we should have background checks.
Stop me.
This guy passed like so many background checks pretty much every time he bought a gun. He had no criminal record, no history of mental illness.
He was on anti-anxiety meds.
Lots of people are on anti-anxiety meds.
Yeah,
that's what I've been hearing around the grapevine.
That's another thing I hate. I also hate when tragedies like this occurs. When people say, "See, the reason these tragedies occur is because when someone comes forward with a mental illness, unlike the rest of the world, the United States doesn't do anything about it." And I just want to say, do what? Lock us up and put us in a mental hospital?
Here's what you have to understand, because I know people with anxiety disorders.
Yeah.
An anxiety disorder is not going to make you grab a gun and kill a bunch of people. An anxiety disorder is going to make you seize up on the floor, maybe even lose consciousness.
Yeah, and that's what offends me the most, is because I have anxiety disorder. I technically have a mental illness, and the way these people talk, I don't want to sound like an SJW, but it's basically treating people like me like we're walking time bombs.
We've said this before, but it's probably worth saying again. mentally ill people are no more likely to commit acts of violence than everyone else, but they are 10 times as likely to become victims of violence.
Yeah. Didn't you call me a bigot because of that?
Yeah.
Wait, I called someone a bigot because of that.
You called
me actually.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if that's your position, you're a bigot. I mean, you're talking about a whole group
of people. I apologize, though.
Guys.
All right.
I apologize, though, in that comment thread.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, apology accepted.
And also going back to this, going back to how overreacting we are, it's like people can't even. It's like people are so terrified, they're looking at the wrong directions. Like, I actually got suspended from high school one time because, I mean, granted, it was a little stupid on my part, but I was having a really bad day, and I told several of my friends, you know what, days like this just make me wish I could blow up the school, And the very next day they brought me in. I was sent home. They had the police, the liaison officer we had there interview me. They had to search my locker, and I admit that was kind of stupid. I even apologized. I wrote a former apology, but I still think, looking back now, it was a little bit of overreacting. It's like
I think what they're thinking is if you did end up doing it and they didn't do anything, their keisters would be on the line, and so they go way overprotective about it.
That's the only reason they do that. They don't do that because they legitimately care about the students, and I honestly think that deep down they know laws like that work. It's just because they don't want to get sued because. Oh yeah, that's another thing I've actually seen in some cases. Shortly after a massive shooting or a bombing occurs, it's always, hey, I'm a lawyer. I think that place didn't do enough to protect your kids, so let's sue their asses.
Yeah, that happens.
I hate lawyers like that. Because instead of seeing sympathy for their fellow man, when they see people on the ground dying, they're thinking, "Oh, boy, dollar signs." I know. Back not too long ago, I was in a car accident, and even though it was a minor one, no one got hurt, and our insurance covered it. Shortly, 2 days later, I get a note saying, "We recently found out you were in a car accident. We think you might have been illegally judged for it."
That's because they want your money.
Yep.
Right, back to the mattress Matt thing.
Yeah. Does anyone have a good reason why someone would need a bump stock besides what this guy did?
I don't know enough about it to
They're
say
a lot
that
of fun.
I am listening to people who know a lot more guns than I do, and whose opinions I trust. And I mean, the media, of course, is saying, "Oh, well, it's AR-15," and it's all because, of course, that's their embodiment of evil is the AR-15.
Yeah, he also had Kalashnikovs.
But
sorry, guys.
Those mods, the binary triggers, the bump fire mods. I'm told there is no way that they can keep up that pace of automatic fire that you see in the videos.
Yeah, the FBI, the guys that investigated this place confirmed that there were Kalashnikovs, and Kalashnikovs are actually a lot easier to convert to full auto because, unlike the AR-15, which requires a mechanism inside of it to do that, with the Kalashnikov, the only thing that prevents it from being full auto is a little mechanism in the firing system, and you can. And a friend of mine actually told me if you know what you're doing, you can easily grind that away.
Yeah, I think it's just
it's a sear inside the trigger group that prevents prevents the firing pin from moving forward until you actually release the trigger.
And all you got to do is just take a metal filer and file that sear away, and you're good to go.
But according to them, based on the audio, they were thinking it was more like an M240 Bravo. I'm not sure what that is, but something similar.
That's a machine gun. It's a machine gun. It's the U.S. version of the FN Mag. It's a machine gun.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a heavy machine gun actually.
Yeah.
It's relatively heavy. Fires 7.62. No.
7.62 NATO. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking about fully automatic weapons that are really difficult to get legally. We're talking about months of waiting periods as you go through all these different background checks. Something like $200,000, and even then, for some reason, they have to be made before May 1986.
1984, 86, is it?
Yeah.
I have 86 in my notes.
Can't you just get replacement firing mechanisms like you can do over here to make the guns fully auto?
Yeah. It's just, I don't, and not to mention, as you said earlier, you know, I mean, another thing that also they can't get the numbers right on how many guns he had. Like, I remember, like, when they first came out, they said, oh, he had over 30 guns. Then they said, oh, he only had 10 guns. No, he had 25 guns. No, he has 19 guns. No, the FBI found 15. No, they found 13 and all that. It's like, how about we just don't say anything until we know, okay?
Yeah, I think
that's the best course of action. Yeah.
I think this
also
is
planning on
banning
banning machine shops and hand tools. There's no possible way that you'll ever get guns. I mean, even in countries where there are strict gun laws, you still got firearms available because you can make them. It's not, you know, it's not rocket science.
You can even make a potato cannon out of a PVC pipe.
Yeah, but I mean, this is going back to a second ago, this is what we're seeing in the news media. Everyone has to be the first to report on something. Who cares if it's right or not? And so, I mean, these initial reports are all confused and all over the place. And like, I think a couple of places got the guy's name wrong and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. In all honesty, Shane, that's why nowadays I laugh at TV shows and movies, you know, that have, you know, the reporter as the hero, because if you look at the history of news coverage, 90% of the time, the news media has nothing to do with a change in philosophy.
Yeah.
In fact, they don't often cover stories like that until afterwards, you know, like a perfect example is Bıᴛᴄᴏ Madoff. You know, I mean, I saw this one TV show which tried to portray that it was actually news reporters that caught Bıᴛᴄᴏ Madoff, and I'm thinking, nope. Bıᴛᴄᴏ Madoff was captured because his own kids and several of his investors, you know, compiled this huge list of paperwork which saying Bıᴛᴏ Madoff is not a legitimate businessman. He's a con artist.
Because even after repeated complaints, the feds refused to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, that's the irony about all these regulations, is that because there's so many regulations, you know, that it's difficult for regulators to say, okay, which specific law did he regulate, and as consequence, if a criminal is smart enough, he can just weave around it, you know, or he can find that one little loophole, you know. That's what happens when your laws are so complex.
Well, just like government education, public education, you've got a displacing effect. Whenever you've got government in any area, it displaces what the private sector would have normally done. So who's to say that there wouldn't have been agencies to do ratings and whatnot on persons like that would have provided better coverage?
Speaking of schools, Shane showed this on one of his videos. It's really funny when I see a person saying that in America corporations control the schools, and I'm like, how?
No, they don't.
Teachers unions do.
Yeah. And I've encountered a few teachers, and you know what? I don't even bother debating with them anymore, because every time I always bring up the subject that I'm sorry, I don't care how you feel, you are not underpaid. In fact, you make more money than most people, and they always try to pull the whole, yeah, but we only work 9 months a year, you know, and I'm just like, it has been
what they should be paid. It has more, but there's no marketplace.
Department of Labor that the average teacher makes more money than engineers, nurses, and psychiatrists.
Yeah, I'm actually becoming a teacher myself in the future. Yeah.
Here's hoping you don't get gobbled up by the Borg.
And I mean, that's even true in like my home state of North Carolina. We're not even a union state, and they're getting paid up there, and they still go whining, we're paid so little.
Yeah, it's like,
well, and not to mention no marketplace. So how can anyone know what they should?
Not to mention, I saw this one video of this one teacher complaining that they're underpaid, and they said, "Well, yeah, we do make some good payment where we're working, but you know, we only work 3 months, and we have to get a second job and all that." And the comments are full of people saying, "No, a lot of school districts nowadays give 10 years, so they get paid summer vacation." And even if they don't, a lot of people were saying, I fucking would get rid of a third of my paycheck if I could get three whole months off.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, cool. I personally know a number of
Halloween
teachers,
off.
and it's like, no, we work more than 9 months. It's 9 months of teaching and then 3 months of planning.
Yeah.
Like, so you get you can have like 2 options to get paid, and it's either you get paid a lesser amount over 12 months or 9 months of what you would expect to get paid as a teacher, and then like meetings over the summer.
Yeah, Shane, I actually Actually, it's pretty funny because with the whole gun control debate, you know, I mean, a lot of people are saying that only the police should have guns, but a lot of them tend to be leftists who hate the police. And I wrote down this really funny, you know, paradox scenario where it's like, okay, so we're not allowed to have police anymore. So does that mean we can carry knives and guns to protect us then? And they're like, well, no, because those are evil murder machines. And I'm like, okay, so what happens if we get robbed or raped? What are we supposed to do? Pray to God? And then they reply, what? How dare you discriminate against religious minorities? I'm sorry, pray to Allah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mean pray to the blue-eyed Scott? What, guys?
Yeah.
I love Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'm not ashamed to admit it. I mean, not ashamed to admit it.
Yeah, I mean...
Bad puns, but that was just horrible.
By the way, I'm done with all my scumbags, so you guys can talk about whatever aspects of this you want.
Yeah, I got one little parting shot to Piercy Boy. Hey,
okay.
Pierce, you remember those 28 kids that got shot on my birthday? Because, well, my birthday, no less, December the 14th, for the record.
Wow.
Well,
no.
Well, I haven't forgotten. Every stinking birthday, I have to live with the mental shame of having to deal with an autist who I didn't know killing 20 children. And here you are on your high horse saying that if it were a Muslim that killed those 59 people and wounded almost well over 400 or 500, I don't know.
Maybe you have PTSD. Because that was someone I almost included this person as a scumbag, but someone was saying that the news reports of the killing could give kids PTSD, so parents look for signs.
Oh yeah, and they were saying, how do you explain mass shootings to your children? And like they actually did that with The View and all that. They're like, you know, The View was talking to Penn Jillette, and like, how are we going to tell kids? What should we do? And Penn Jillette, you know, pretty much said, look, don't do that to your kids, okay? Don't have them worrying and panicking. You know, the job to protect your children is you and the authorities' responsibility and nothing else. You know, you shouldn't be wrapping your kids up in bubble wrap. That's not going to make them safe. That's going to turn them into paranoid schizophrenics.
Yeah.
How do you think about Jimmy Kimmel's monologue from the other day?
I didn't hear it. What did he say?
Oh, I've seen that. So I'll give you the too long didn't read version.
It tugged on all the heartstrings, or at least tried to.
You beat me to it, Pipsqueak.
Feel the common sense kind of thing. How we need to have these common sense gun laws and more regulations and stuff like that. I mean, you would have
this whole thing about common sense gun laws. Does he not think they were trying to do that with all the others? And they're saying, "Oh, that's what we did wrong. It wasn't common sense."
Well, I mean, the bump stocks are a relatively new thing, so.
I honestly think, Shane, you know, I agree with your video. I think that most of these people who say that they just want common sense gun laws, I think deep down inside they're anti-gun and legitimately want to repeal the Second Amendment because they know deep down inside that common sense gun laws are that they're just using that as an excuse to say, oh, well, they didn't work with this, so we got to have more laws. Oh, that didn't stop this guy. Well, let's have more laws. You know what? Let's just ban all guns altogether.
And use the Second Amendment as toilet paper.
Because you oppose them for it, they say, well, you're against common sense. You're so unreasonable. Who's against common sense?
Oh, yeah. You know what that kind of reminds me of? You know what these people? It kind of reminds me of back in school, like, you know, like the teacher finds, someone put a whoopee cushion on her chair, and she wants to know, okay, which one of you guys did it? But nobody answers that. It's like, well, fine then. You're all missing recess and staying 2 hours after school until someone fesses up. It's like, teacher, that doesn't fix the problem. He's not going to tell. It's just going to make everyone pissed off and mad at you.
Yep.
Just hearing that comparison makes me glad I'm out of the public school system.
Yeah.
Has anyone heard that joke? Joseph Stalin finding the culprit?
Yeah.
What is it?
No. It's a Soviet Union joke. It's like Joseph Stalin and all the Politburo is up in their meetings, and someone sneezes, and so Joseph Stalin asks who sneezed. Nobody answers, So he orders everyone in the first row shot. There's no who sneezes. Nobody answers. So he orders everyone in the second row shot. And he asks the third time, who sneezes? Someone in the fourth row shakily stands up and puts his hands up, and Stalin just goes, "Bless you, comrade."
Yeah.
I get it. I don't get it.
Fun fact, Stalin actually had someone arrested simply because he didn't stand to attention when he arrived on a speech.
He wasn't in a
actually,
wheelchair, was he? 'Cause
totally
that would be
humanity.
kind of weird.
Hey,
He wasn't. Basically, what happened was that Stalin was actually, no, it wasn't standing for attention. He had to sit down. Basically, what happened was that he was going to give like this big speech about how glorious the communistic Soviet Union was. However, though, he must have got the date wrong or something, because he took like over an hour or so to do that, and everyone kept standing up because they were under strict orders not to sit until he said they could. But one guy said, "You know what? My back and legs are killing me. It's freezing cold out here. I want to sit down and warm myself up." And he did. And shortly after Stalin gave that speech, he said, because they did have cameras, believe it or not, at the time, and he said, "That man who sat down before I told him to, I want him found." And when they found him, they said, "Okay, you're spending 7 years in a re-education camp."
Christ.
I want to know what the story is, but behind that guy in the picture that's getting passed around a lot now is a meme of, in Nazi Germany, all these people are giving the Nazi salute except for one guy.
Yeah.
Hang on. Is the one guy who isn't in? Is the one guy who isn't giving the Nazi salute? Is he in a Navy captain's uniform by any chance?
I don't recognize uniforms.
Because I know because if
I'm pretty sure
he is, that would be the captain of the Graf Spee, and that actually happened in Argentina. He was saluting the men on his ship that were killed.
Man, you wouldn't believe the apologetics.
It was the Battle of the River Plate, if I'm not mistaken.
You wouldn't believe the apologetics that these commies will do for Stalin.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sorry, as a guy who studies World War II history, and World War II gets brought up a lot, I hate it when people portray World War II as
he's out again.
Imperial stormtroopers like group that wanted to rule the entire world if they want to kill everyone. And when I ask, yeah, but what about the millions of people the Allies killed, especially what the Soviets did? They say, well, it was necessary. It had to be done. They were at war. What would you have done?
War is mass murder.
Yeah.
War is hell.
It's same thing with the atomic bomb. Like, so many people say, well, what would you have done? We had no choice. And I'm like, I do have a choice. Here's a crazy idea. How about once Japan has been kicked out of all the territories that's occurred, you stop fighting, you tell Japan, okay, we're going to stop fighting now, but you know what happens if you do this again. That's the reason why wars end up, causing more wars. It's not because, people want to go to war. It's because even when you have a legitimate reason for going to war, people can't stop at the border. They have to say, oh, no, we got to go to their capital. We got to burn it down, overthrow everything and change their ways. And what does that make you look like to the people?
There was some kind of joke that people in England kept telling World War II. Every time, something weird or happened or someone wondered why, someone else would say, well, there is a war on.
Japan is why we need.
Why did it rain the last 5 days in a row? Well, there is a war on.
Japan is why we need AR-15s, rifle behind every blade of grass.
Hey Shane, are you gonna make a video on PragerU to explain why the atomic bomb was a moral choice?
I haven't seen that one. It'll be interesting to check it out.
You should. It's an interesting video, but they use a priest, ironically.
Yeah, I mean, they call me crazy or whatnot, but if I had a time machine, it's one thing I would really love to do. Go back in time, steal a hydrogen bomb, and tell all the people saying, listen, you are not to drop an atomic bomb on Japan, and you are not to give the atomic bomb to the Soviet Union. And if you don't, then I'm giving it to Hitler.
Actually,
that could have serious consequences, Chris.
Actually, one of their arguments in the Prager University video, they said.
Well, actually, no. All you'd have to do if you went back in time was steal Nazi scientist documents saying, it's like, yeah, we don't know how to make a atomic bomb. Take them into America and show Einstein. It's like, see, the Nazis don't know what they're doing. You don't have to worry.
Just saying.
In all honesty, that's why I don't care what people say. I have no respect for the atomic spies who sold the atomic bomb to Nazi Germany, because it was well established that there was zero chance of the Nazis gaining a hold of the atomic bomb. And they sold the bombs to the Soviet Union for one reason and one reason only. That's because they were already communists, and they didn't want their precious Soviet Union to collapse. You know, and in all honesty, I blame them for the reason why we will never have nuclear disarmament. Because, look, you know, people will say, but if the United States only had atomic bombs, they'd do all this. Well, here's the thing. The United States can't bomb everyone, you know. It's much easier to gang up on one nation and pressure them to change their ways. But now, because the Soviets have bombs and the United States and the Soviets gave their bombs to their allies, and now it's trickled down to the point where even third world countries can have nuclear arsenals. Now it's impossible because, you know, the people are going to say, well, our enemies have atomic bombs, so we shouldn't give up our atomic bombs. And congratulations, atomic scientists. You've put the world in a permanent state of panic, of potential threat, because no one wants to give up their bombs now because everyone has them.
Cheesecake now.
Yeah. And I do not believe for a second the whole, you know, mutually assured destruction will work, because there are some people, like people out there, who are willing to use nuclear weapons and all that. I mean, hell, in all honesty, if North Korea did have, if North Korea did have access to the ICBMs we had, there's no doubt in my mind he would use it. The only reason he hasn't nuked us is because it's been confirmed the North Korean nuclear arsenal is garbage. They could barely even hit Japan, let alone the United States.
It couldn't even hurt a Spurg, let alone an entire country.
But I mean, it almost actually happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis. If that hadn't been resolved, yeah, it would have happened. So
people.
Shane, you're sounding a little choppy, buddy.
Yeah, sorry.
But
yeah,
Chris, we don't understand the real politic and the balance of power of the situation.
Yeah, and probably the dumbest argument I ever heard from one of the atomic spies, when they asked him why he sold the bomb to the Soviet Union, he was like, well, I just wanted the Soviet Union to protect itself if ever the United States became fascist. And I'm like, were you not freaking paying attention to Stalin? Imagine if Stalin developed the atomic bomb before the United States did. You know, all of Europe would be speaking Russian.
Didn't Max Eason describe that Stalinism as super fascist?
Yeah.
I don't know who said this.
And it's so ironic how oh, sorry, John.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Said this, but those who do...
What is it, Johnny?
Oh, it's
You're
fine.
breaking up.
But
yeah, we're not getting you, Johnny.
Oh, I need to check. I only have like 3 stuff up. Here's the problem. Yeah, hopefully that solves it.
Okay, what were you saying?
There's an old saying that gets tossed around a lot here on the internet. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.
Oh, Santayana.
Yeah. Santayana.
Yeah. Joseph Santayana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But we could have listened to the Founding Fathers. We could have. They really gave good advice.
Yeah.
Or Ron Paul.
But the Second Amendment was for muskets, right?
No.
Oh, yeah.
You are very
Yeah,
funny,
the First
though.
Amendment is for soapboxes.
Yeah, and it's so funny. People say that people say, but the Second Amendment was written during a time when there were only muskets. Well, even if that was, well, here's the thing: they had you know, they used more than just guns. You know, they had knives, they had swords. You know, the cavalry were still using lances. They had grenades, and believe it or not, there were early primitive repeating firearms there. You know, the British Navy had this thing called the Puckle gun, which was like a primitive Gatling gun, and there was that. I can't pronounce the guy's name, but there was like this rifle that used pneumonic air pressure, and it could carry 20 shots. And while it wasn't used during the Revolutionary War, it was very popular amongst settlers who were rich enough to get it.
The Garandani rifle.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jefferson gave those to Lewis and Clark.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like the Puckle gun was invented in 1718.
Yep. Funny thing about the Puckle gun, the guy who developed it, he was so religious and all that he said that here's what we have to do to prove our religious might. If we're fighting against a fellow Christian nation, we'll use traditional ball ammo, but if we're fighting against atheists or Orthodox Jews or Muslims, we have to use square balls because they're more painful. And he never explained how he was going to get square balls to fire from a round barrel.
Or how they were going to be in any way aerodynamic.
Yeah, it's...
Maybe they could have invented a square barrel.
Yeah, it's an interesting gun.
Make a square barrel and have it kind of twist down so you get the rifling. And
yeah, yeah.
Actually, that was what they did for the first rifles. They used barrels that were hexagonal and they spiral around.
The barrels were, yeah.
Yep. It wasn't until invention of the Minier ball that we have guns today, you know.
Well, there's like different kinds of rifling, and some of them are kind of hexagonal, and some are like a rounded hexagon, and other things like that.
Oh yeah, Shane, that's another one of my favorite arguments about modern guns versus old-fashioned guns. A lot of people say, yeah, but the founding fathers couldn't have anticipated that modern guns would become so deadly and cause devastation, and I'm like, have you seen? Well, granted, it's not the Revolutionary War, but it was, during the Civil War where they did have, only slightly upgraded technology from the American Revolution. Have you seen pictures of the United States Civil War? They were still using muzzle-loading black powder muskets, and the injuries some of those guys received are disgusting.
Oh, there was some kind of thing like when they were looking at the shot heard round the world, the one that started the Revolutionary War. There were a bunch of forensic guys who went over all the old accounts, and I'm not sure how, but somehow from the descriptions and from the medical reports and all that, they were able to find out that first shot actually killed like 4 different people. It just went through people.
There are plenty of battlefield reports that confirm that a musket ball will go through 4 soldiers in rank before it stops.
Oh yeah.
Those things are like 70, 80 caliber or something.
Yeah. There's a stereotype that muskets are horrendously inaccurate, and you can't kill anyone unless you're right up in front of them, and they do barely any damage. They're actually in the right hands. They can actually hit up to 50 to 100 yards away.
I fired muzzle loaders.
They're accurate up to 100 yards. The problem is most of them weren't manufactured with sights. But if you were a marksman, you often actually had a gunsmith put sights on your musket, so you could do that.
The reason why muskets were inaccurate was not actually really because they were smoothbore. It actually had more to do with the fact that because to make the reloading faster, many nations, especially Britain and France, would make the balls slightly smaller than the barrel, so you could just easily slide it down there. Whereas with rifles or similar guns,
even with that, they were still accurate out to 100 yards.
Yeah, you had to pack it down. A friend of mine in high school had a muzzle loader, and we went out shooting it. And yeah, you had to pack that thing down to get the ball down there. But I mean, I was pretty good. I wasn't any kind of expert marksman, and I could reliably hit a 12-ounce soda can. I think we were 200 yards away or something.
Yeah,
maybe not quite.
It's not about
that's pretty good with open sights.
Yeah, I mean,
it's amazing. We're talking about guns now.
Yeah, and it's and it's pretty funny because I mean today, because 2014 to 2018 is the 100-year anniversary about World War I. I mean, in school we were taught that the reason why World War I was so bloody and devastating was because of all these new fancy guns. And no, the reason why it was so bloody, and guys like Indy Nidell on the Great War Channel pointed out, and especially in the early days of the war, the reason why World War I was so bloody and stalemate was because even though they had machine guns and all these modern day ammo, the commanders were still stuck in the old 17th century mindset of mass cavalry charges and bayonet charges and soldiers fighting in rows of 2.
Have y'all seen?
Well, and also it was really expensive. You didn't really break out the machine gun unless you had to, and that was something they learned for World War II when they made the automatic weapons less powerful, because that meant that you could have smaller rounds made with less gunpowder, and so it didn't cost as much.
I don't like how they teach that nationalism was one of the. Well, it's true that nationalism is one of the main causes of the First and Second War, but not exact. I think it's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah,
it was pretty much all these different treaties they had, for mutual defense.
It was the alliance.
As soon as any 2 countries got in a war, it was going to pull the rest of Europe in with it.
Yeah, but where's conscription come into play? Which wars actually had no conscription?
Britain
Australia didn't have any conscription for the
until
first
1915. Until after Gallipoli occurred, and like troops were getting demoralized, and they're saying no. After what happened in Gallipoli, I'm not going. And then the British were like, okay, we have to start drafting now because we're not meeting our quota.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going. Like, how many participants would there actually have been in these wars without conscription?
Yeah. Well, Indy Nidell pointed this out, that even if there wasn't conscription, there still would have been enough because, you got to remember the mentality was different. I mean, today we're more skeptical of our government. But back in those days, people were, it was much easier to convince people, a common thing was, your motherland or fatherland is under attack, and it's your patriotic.
I think
the fatherland or the motherland or whatever you call your, whatever you call your nation, whatever you refer to your nation, they said that back in those days it was your civic duty as a citizen of your country to serve.
Have y'all seen the USA Today article where they were showing how you can get an attachment for your AR that shoots grenades?
A grenade attachment for
get a grenade, though. I mean,
a grenade launcher for an AR-15.
Yeah.
Like, take a shot thing, put it on the end, stretch it back, put the grenade in, pew.
Well, it's a special round, and then there's something that slides over the barrel, and I'm sure you need a special.
Hang on, we're talking about a cup grenade launcher.
Yeah.
Like a cup type that actually goes over the barrel.
Yeah. Although the U.S. in World War II had the best grenade launcher, And actually, going back to World War I, it's another one of my favorite myths that I love debunking that a lot of people love to say. It's like they love to portray, especially in leftist universities, they love to say that it was all these right-wing capitalists and religious conservatives who were pro-World War I because of all the money they would make on weapon sales, and it was the leftists who were saying no, we shouldn't be fighting, we should all be holding hands. Actually, nothing is further from the truth. In fact, a lot of left-wing groups at the time were very nationalistic, and they actually supported the war because they felt, oh, this is our time for our workers' uprising to rise up against, the Austrians or Russians or whatever and overthrow the evil monarchs.
The Bolshevik Revolution.
Actually, that's a very good point, because in Germany, the German Communist Party actually opposed the war until Russia entered it.
Yep.
At which point they were all in.
Yep. And here's another fun fact. It was actually capitalism that tried to bring an end to the war. There was actually a group of German industrialists who were losing a shit ton of money to the war because the government was hogging everything and forcing them to sell them at an artificially low price. And they actually tried to contact several dignitaries in England and Russia to try to pressure their respective nations to end the war. And guess who was the biggest opponent of the meeting? Vladimir Lenin.
It annoys me when people try to attribute deaths to capitalism. Yeah. Have y'all seen that thing go around?
I found this graphic about the...
I'm sorry, Shane, go ahead.
I found this graphic about the... Can I share this thing now? Let's see, hang on.
We'll just be doing the move sets.
Hang on.
You stick it in the chat.
That should be it. Okay, you should be able to see that now. That's the... let me zoom into it.
It's just an
blue part right there is what they're saying is the grenade launcher mount.
That's the actual grenade launcher. That's the M203.
It's a what?
It's an M203.
That's a 40mm grenade launcher.
Made by Heckler & Koch.
And it attaches to an AR-15?
Yeah. And something tells me that that's more of like a thing for firing dummy cartridges, because here's the thing, you can't just put a grenade, like there are actually grenade launchers that don't fire actual grenades. They're meant for anti-riot duty, for firing tear gas or non-lethal rounds,
Speaking of, did any of you guys see that one video where an Antifa LARPer got hit in the nuts by a dummy grenade?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I saw that. I thought that was a tear gas bomb or something like that. Or a rubber bullet.
Still got him right in the baby maker. I am so classy sometimes.
I hope that paralyzed him.
Here's what one guy in the story.
Needs more whiny teenagers.
Here's what one guy in the story says about it. Quote: "It's like taking a truck picture and attaching a big ass monster truck wheels to it and saying it's the same thing."
Wow.
Like I took my truck, I put the monster truck wheels on it, therefore it's a monster truck. No, there's.
You paint an exhilarating picture.
Kind of reminds me of this video I saw one time. It was about medieval stuff and all that. They were talking about Charlemagne's sword, and they show a picture of it, and like the museum advertised this was the actual sword that Charlemagne used, even though several historical experts and swords experts, pointed out actually they didn't have swords like that in 9th century France. I mean, yes, it was built on Charlemagne's old sword, but his sword pretty much rotted away. And what we see now is basically, first they replaced the handguard, then they replaced the handle, and then they replaced the blade. So it's pretty much not Charlemagne's sword anymore. Whatever that paradox is called, I forgot what it's called. It's where
Theseus.
Yeah, that's where like you take like Noah's Ark, but it's rotted away, so you basically have to keep rebuilding it to the point where is it technically Noah's Ark anymore?
What's the name of the paradox?
It's not a paradox. It's a story, the tale of the ship of Theseus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the ship of Theseus. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean that is a thing, like you say, okay, if you have an axe and you change the handle and then later you change the blade, do you still have the same axe?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm surprised it wasn't
Here's an axe filled with solid. It's made of solid gold. That's nice, but it's not my axe. Oh, well, I have one that's made of silver. No, that's not my axe. Oh, is this one? This is just a plain old blunt axe. Yep, that's my axe. Yay, I'm going to give you the gold and silver one just for honesty. Anyone remember that fairy tale?
Oh, yeah, I read that before.
Yeah.
I heard they made a
moderately
successful game out of the former.
You never heard that story, Shane?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's about a poor lumberjack. He's a poor lumberjack, but he's a good father, and he has a nice, happy family, although he does wish better. One day, he's chopping wood, and he loses an axe in a river that he can't swim through because it's too rapid. Well, then a water nymph appears, and she says, I'll find the axe for you. Then she hands him an axe that's completely made of gold, and he thinks, oh my, think of all the stuff I could buy with this axe if I axe. But at the end of the day, then he says, no, I'm a humble man. This isn't my axe. She goes back. She brings one that's made of silver. Again, he says, that's not my axe. She finally finds his real axe, which is just a plain ordinary axe. And he said, yeah, that's my axe. And as a reward for his honesty, she gives him the silver and the gold one.
Okay.
Yeah. It's basically a tale basically saying if you're humble and honest, you'll get good things.
What is it about stories of axes and honesty? Because you got the George Washington cherry tree thing, which didn't actually happen.
Yeah. I remember reading somewhere that George Washington actually heard that story, and he said, that never happened. That never happened with me and my father.
Yeah. Are you gonna? Is there any myths about Abraham Lincoln?
I'm sure there are.
Oh, here's a myth about Abraham Lincoln. He
wanted to free the slaves. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. We are still taught at school the Emancipation Proclamation ended all slavery. No, it didn't.
No, it didn't. That would be the 13th Amendment. 13 being my lucky number. Another jack fact for you.
By the way, there was a proposed 13th Amendment that Lincoln did support and actively, call for before the Civil War, but it wasn't to end slavery. It was to amend the Constitution to make it impossible to end slavery.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think people remember that. Because I'm pretty sure, even as a foreigner, Lincoln, all he wanted to do was preserve the Union, which is pretty ironic.
He flat out said that. There was actually an abolitionist that said, think of this, Mr. Lincoln. We can make this the great crusade against slavery. And he said, well, that's a noble cause, but I can't say it because then I'd be lying. Because this isn't a war to free us slaves. If we free all the slaves in the process, good. But if we don't, that's not my problem. This is a strictly to preserve the Union. And that's another myth. The Union let that the Confederacy be formed because they didn't want to get rid of their slaves. Yeah, it's like, no, there was a whole lot of economic factors. And here's a fun fact. Some southern states didn't even want us to secede, like Texas. They were pressured to do so.
Yeah, well, I know in North Carolina, you had like the eastern counties over towards the coast that were, pretty gung-ho on slavery. And then the mountains, the counties up there, people didn't like slavery and they didn't want to secede over it. And then you have the Piedmont where I am, where, you didn't really have a whole lot of slavery either. The people there are more neutral, but they had actually voted not to secede based on slavery. And then later on in the year, after the war happens, they're like, oh, geez, we got to figure out, we're in the middle of this, literally. We got to pick a side. So, and it was very controversial, but, you know, even the counties that didn't have slaves, that didn't even like slavery, you know, that didn't want to secede over slavery were like, yeah, we got to secede because we don't want to join in aggression. And that's how it was. It was war of aggression.
And here's another myth. You know, I mean, you know, so many people got so offended because one of the sportscasters was called Robert Lee. It's like, people, do you not study Robert E. Lee? That guy was not a racist. Fun fact, he didn't even support the Confederacy at first. He didn't like secession. The reason why he joined was a combination of atrocities committed by the North against the South, and not to mention when his home state of Virginia decided to join, he was under a lot of pressure. And finally, well,
he was a colonel in the U.S. Army, and he didn't want to go to war against his own. He didn't want to go to war against fellow Americans.
And I remember reading somewhere that, you know, when he first left, you know, he didn't even want to defect or anything. He just said, you know, look, if you want to go to war with the South, that's fine, but I don't want to take part of it, so I'm resigning. And it wasn't until after, you know, like Fort Sumter and all the atrocities that he agreed to fight for the South to begin with, you know. And here's another. He just
wanted to be a colonel. He didn't want to be promoted to general because colonel was his U.S. Army rank, and he didn't. You know,
and here's another thing. Even though he kind of owned a few slaves, although there's some debate about that, he treated his slaves pretty well. And personally, he was not, you know, very, very comfortable with the idea of slavery. You know.
Well, there was one guy that that had died, and Robert E. Lee was supposed to like deal with his estate, and the estate, you know, had a bunch of slaves.
Yeah.
And Lee tried for like 5 years to free those slaves.
Yeah. And here's another myth about slavery in the United States. Now, I am not saying slavery was good and it was a terrible thing, but here's the thing. Contrary to popular belief, slaves in America were actually treated fairly well. You know, in fact, there's many accounts of slaves being treated as members of the family they served.
Well, it depends. I mean, it ranged all over the place.
Well,
you know, here's the thing, you know,
common or Mythbusters.
I mean, a common stereotype of slavery in America is, you know, you think of like those really hot fields. You know, the slaves are hot, they're sweating, they're thin, and there's a white guy calling them the N-word and whipping them. And yes, stuff like that existed, but only a tiny handful of them were.
Yeah, it was more the exception than the rule. But Johnny, you mentioned Mythbusters. Guess what? That guy who's narrating all the Mythbusters episodes, his name's Robert Lee.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, it's a very common name, people. Robert Lee's a very common name. You know, contrary to popular belief, Lee is not an Asian name. It's actually an old Anglo-Saxon name.
It's the FFV, the first family of Virginia, the Lees, and Robert E. Lee was the son of Light Horse Harry.
Yeah, I believe.
If I'm remembering correctly, didn't
Robert E. Lee and his father were war heroes.
A lot of work during the Reconstruction period to try and reunite America.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why he has a bunch of statues around the place. It wasn't because he was a Confederate general. It was because he did a lot of work during the Reconstruction.
He hated the idea of statues of himself, by the way. But if you guys know the play Inherit the Wind, that was written by Jerome Lawrence and Robert E. Lee.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah. So there's another one for you. It's a common name. If you're going to get triggered every time you see someone with the first name Robert and a last name Lee, especially if their middle initials E.
Hopefully they're not on the no-fly list.
Kind of reminds me of that one girl, you know, who thought that there was the Ku Klux Klan at her school because she saw a piece of lab equipment being covered by a drape and it looks like a triangle.
Yeah.
And I actually commented on that video, and I was pretty much saying, lady, if you think that you're seeing Ku Klux Klan members everywhere, you need to see professional help because that is not being concerned for your safety. That's being a paranoid schizophrenic.
Yeah, or paranoid delusional at least.
Yeah, you know, I mean.
I don't know about schizophrenia, but it's paranoid delusional.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you're paranoid. If you think that there's some unnamed force out there, whether it be the patriarchy, the Nazis, or aliens from the planet Klaatu, you know, you're clearly not in the right state of mind, you know, because if there's no evidence to support a suspicion, you know, I mean, and
but
you know,
I think there are a couple of additional criteria to be paranoid schizophrenic. But.
Yeah, but you know, it's still, you know, it's like. You know, and it's especially, you know, another funny thing I really love is like when they talk about neo-Nazis and all that, you know, and again, I'm a historical reader and I read about World War II and the Nazis and all that. In all honesty, if Hitler were alive today and he were to see these neo-Nazis, he'd be face-palming himself and saying, why the hell do these guys exist? Yeah. Fun fact, there was an American neo-Nazi in America during World War II, and guess what? While the Germans sympathized with them and sent allies there, Hitler and many personal of them hated them, especially the Ku Klux Klan. They hated the Klan. You know, because, like, basically from what I can gather, basically from what they basically said was, like, the Ku Klux Klan, they're just these white peasants, you know, who you know, are talking about race, and they're basically saying there's more to the mission of the Nazi Party than just, oh, we want white people in charge, which isn't even true anyway. That's another myth. Hitler was not a white supremacist. He was an Aryan supremacist.
Aryan supremacist, yeah.
Yeah, Aryan supremacist or Aryan. You know, there's, you know, fun. You know, I like that so much when people say Hitler was a white supremacist, and I'm like, oh wow, but there's a picture of these Jewish Poles holding their hands up, surrounded by SS officers, and they're whiter than sour cream.
Well, it's interesting if you look at a lot of the racist literature around the turn of the 20th century. When they're talking about white people and white people being superior, they're specifically talking about Nordic whites.
Yep. Or as we call them today, WASP, which is White Anglo-Saxon Protestant, meaning that if your ancestors don't come from England or Scandinavia or Scandinavia, you're racially inferior.
Yeah, not Germany and not Spain or Italy or even Ireland.
Yep.
They were all inferior. And
oh, yeah. People fail to realize the Irish were slaves in America, too, at one point.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Quite a lot.
And it's pretty cruel because there was this one black chick, you know, where people brought that up and they said, yeah, but you do realize that historically, and it's been proven that there were white Jewish Slavs and Irish Catholics in America who also pretty much lived under slavery. And she was like, oh, well, that doesn't count because they were more forced to be slaves and they weren't bought. It's like, or they said, well, it was involuntary service.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, it was.
You're talking about the Irish? They absolutely were forced into it.
Yeah, and they were like, well, no, they were. Yeah, she was like, no, they were in involuntary servitude, and that's different. How? They're being forced to serve a guy that they don't want to serve, then they're not getting paid for it. How's that not slavery?
Actually, a lot of slaves did get paid for it, actually.
Yeah.
Watching you black is kind of stupid when it comes to that.
Yeah. And yeah, that's another myth too. Blacks, you know, a lot of slaves did actually get some payment. Actually, like their owners would give them some allowances, and there's actual accounts of this happening. They were actually told, "We'll allow you to work for other people, and if you can give us, you know, twice of the amount of money we paid for you, you can buy your own freedom because you'll basically purchase yourself, and now you're your own master." You know, and some slaves
at least until they banned manumission.
Yep.
By the way, the first guy in North America to have slaves was a guy named Anthony Johnson.
And he was black.
He was black, yep.
Yep, that's another myth about slavery in America, is that it was white people enslaving people of color, when in real life, anyone who was legally free could own slaves. And there are accounts of Asians, Mexicans, and African Americans owning slaves.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah. It wasn't really about, you know, whites are superior to blacks. It's about these people are slaves. And the problem with like Irish slaves, and there were other, I think there were even German slaves and stuff like that. The problem was in the South, it was really hot and they weren't adapted to it, but slaves from West Africa could better tolerate the heat.
Yeah, that's actually where the term redneck comes from, because a lot of the Irish, German, and Polish slaves, you know, were not used to the hot weather, and because they weren't used to it, their necks would burn, and that's how they got the term redneck. It was a derogatory term for an Irish, usually at an Irishman who has that. In fact, actually, there was actually a guy that pointed out, you know, there's a reason why a lot of African Americans in America have Irish-sounding last names. That's because that's really the only white people that black people were allowed to marry were Irishmen, because they were seen as just as worse as blacks.
Is it true that the first gun control laws were pretty much targeted towards blacks?
Nope.
Yep.
Oh yeah. That's
yep.
Right, yeah.
Yep. Freed slaves, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's pretty funny because Danny Glover claimed that the Second Amendment was to kill blacks if they ever escaped. You know, he said, like he was saying, it was written so that way white men would have the freedom to own guns to kill their slaves if they tried to escape or overthrow them.
No. Why on earth would, like, New England, like Massachusetts and all of them, be so gung-ho in favor of the Second Amendment if that's what it was about.
Yeah.
How about we cast off a tyrannical government, and we didn't want that to happen again?
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, there were laws that flat out said, yes, people of color could own guns if they were free. If they were not slaves, they were allowed to own guns,
And a lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of slaves fought for the South in the Civil War.
Oh, yeah.
It was unofficial until 1864 because there wasn't anything permitting them to. They were kind of doing it clandestinely, but when word got to Jefferson Davis, he offered, and the war ended, but he offered freedom for any slave who fought for the Confederacy for 12 months.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I really love when people see the Virginia battle flag and they say, well, that's a symbol of white supremacy. No, well, first of all, that's not the Confederate flag. That's the battle flag of the Virginia militia.
Actually, it's the Tennessee battle flag. The Virginia is square.
Oh, yeah, but
Virginia is perfectly square, and then Tennessee.
The actual Confederate flag was basically this plain white flag, and it had a red stripe underneath it, and in the corner there was like a pseudo Union Jack, similar to the one found in England.
Well, originally it looked a lot like the U.S. flag, and it kept getting confused for it, and so then they came up with that little emblem that everyone today knows as the Confederate flag. That was the field. The rest of it was white. But then that became confused with the flag of surrender, and so they added the red stripe.
Yeah, it's actually another misconception that people tell us about the Civil War is that people in the South didn't see themselves as Americans; they saw them as citizens of their state. No, the Confederacy in their own Constitution doesn't call themselves the Confederation of insert individual state here. They were the Confederate States of America, and that. They felt that the North/Union had betrayed the ideas of the original United States.
Yep, and it was pretty much a copy of the Constitution. They did some things like the Bill of Rights. Instead of being separate amendments, they just folded it into Article 1, Section 9 and things like that.
The Constitution of the Confederate State, it's more or less the exact same as our.
There are a couple of additional clauses about slavery, which of course is awful, but there's one clause they added which I love, which is that bills passed by Congress are only valid if they only deal with a single subject.
Yeah.
Back then they had to live up to the Time Act.
Yeah, that's true because here's the funny thing about going back to the whole Second Amendment.
Yeah, that existed way back then. That's not a new thing.
Yeah, because in a way, technically speaking, going back to the whole Second Amendment, technically speaking, every single gun law, even the so-called common sense ones, they are in complete violation of the Second Amendment. And people love to say, well, no, because it just says shall not be infringed, and that just means banning them. No, if you go back to the original definition of infringed as it was meant back in those days, infringed didn't just mean banned. It even meant making it more difficult,
any kind of restriction.
Yeah, like
that's what it means now, so it hasn't changed.
Let's say, okay, you can own a musket, but just to be sure, you got to do a background check, and we're going to artificially, raise the price of a musket like they do today. That would be considered infringement.
What changed? Is it the culture or just people getting soft?
It's just the way it always goes, I think, because there are so many forces that just want people disarmed, either because they're afraid of their own fellow humans or because they, worship the government so much they want government to have all the power.
But Shane, libertarians live in a fantasy land. We should move to an island somewhere so we have our libertarian paradise.
Yeah,
I think we did that already, didn't we?
This time it'll work.
I often wonder
why it was capitalism brought on the Industrial Revolution that led to all the imperialism in the late 19th century. And I'm just thinking, you do realize that the British were an empire long before the Industrial Revolution occurred, right? The East Indian Trading Company was established in 1701, if I recall correctly.
Yep, 1701, that's correct.
Yeah. And that's another thing I love, too, is they love to portray as the East Indian Trading Company as proof that free market capitalism won't work because then we'll have groups like East Indian Trading Company ruling over. No, the East Indian
Trading Company was created and supported by the British Crown.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah, it was mercantilism.
Yeah, the East Indian Trading Company, they did what they did not because they had money, it was because they had a letter from the British Crown themselves saying that the East Indian Trading Company is
That was why John Hancock was put on trial for smuggling. He was smuggling in goods from companies that weren't on the approved list from the Crown.
But Shane and Chris, capitalism is but imperialism is the final stage of capitalism, according to Vladimir Lenin.
I thought that was fascism. Yeah.
That's Trotsky.
It's the funny irony is that people like that say fascism is an extreme form of capitalism, even though if you read, fascism goes all the way back to ancient Rome, but modern day fascism, which is the Italian model, if you read Benito Mussolini and several other advocates of fascism, they hated capitalism.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hitler hated. Yeah.
Did they influence? Was it also influenced by Marx as well?
Germany was seen as another political mechanism that Jews used to exploit the Germans. Like, I'm paraphrasing here, but Hitler more or less said about capitalism, he said they're these rich fat guys that sit on their cash, they do nothing, and meanwhile all these patriotic Germans are dying for their country, and these fat capitalists are sitting on their backs using their money to avoid the war,
German Nazism wasn't specifically anti-Semitic. They were anti-Semitic because Jews were the most visible middle class, because they were all bankers and such. They had a lot of money.
And they made a good scapegoat. It's just like with the 1% today. There's no effective difference except the racial component.
Just more social justice, Marxist crap.
Here's one argument that I told an actual socialist who insisted the Nazis weren't real socialists because they were pro big business. Well, if the Nazis were so pro capitalism, why did they force Hugo Juncker to resign from his company, and why did they shut down so many businesses simply because the owners were Jewish?
They would just shut down companies regardless of what their owners was if it was something they could convert into making war machines.
Another fun thing I love to say is when unions love to say, yeah, but did you know that Hitler was strongly anti-union? No, he only went after unions that were pro-communist. The Nazis set up...
they also folded all unions into one single state-controlled union.
They didn't get rid of some.
It was monopolistic unions like we have today.
Yeah, it was he nationalized them. He had not one but two unions. There were two unions. One was like the German, what was it? The German Federation Union.
It was one of them, I believe. Something like that.
And by the way, going back to Simon Whistler, he did this one video about top 10 historical myths, and one that kind of made me laugh was he said, oh, the Nazis could have been overthrown by the Germans, and he was more or less trying to implement it that the reason why people didn't overthrow the Nazis was because of anti-Semitism and belief in it. When I wanted to point out in there, it's like, and his argument was, well, it was because the Gestapo wasn't well armed and it was actually underfunded in some areas. And I'm like, Simon, the Gestapo were just police officers. That's all they were. Contrary to what Holocaust movies like to portray, the Gestapo weren't these big guys that went around, looking for Jews. They were just police officers. It was the SS you wanted to watch out for. They were the ones that went to your house with the machine gun saying, hey, we hear you have Jews and communists in here, so we're placing you all under arrest. I remember seeing a documentary about law enforcement in Nazi Germany, and they actually flat out said the Gestapo barely did anything, and half the time when they did something involving Jews, it was just paper pushing. It was just, oh, the SS captured some Jews and they're putting us in their custody. Okay, here's the paperwork. Okay, they're under arrest. Send them to the prison or the camp or whatever.
Did Hitler push for gun confiscation among the Jews, or was that done before?
Yeah. Well,
the Weimar Republic wasn't exactly, gun friendly, but what the Nazis did specifically was saying that, Jews and all of these other groups were banned from having it, but if you were a member of the Nazi party, you could have guns.
That's another thing. A lot of people like to say, but Hitler was pro-gun. He lowered the waiting list, from 3 years to 1 year, and he lowered the age and all that and made it easier. But if you read the fine print, it flat out says you only get that benefit if you're a member of the Nazi party.
And you're not a Jew or anything like that.
Yeah. You know, a lot of people do that. You know, I mean, hell, there's some leftists, you know, that have actually told me, but you should be, if you're pro-gun, you should be a leftist because, you know, many of the communist leaders said that the peasants should own guns. Yeah, but if you understand the context, they're talking about the peasant army, aka the communist army,
aka the LARPing forces.
Yeah.
In which I will, and you guys are gonna eat this up. I hereby impose a 3-year ban on all LARPing.
Walter, I think we're getting a lot of noise from you there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and here's another. Oh yeah, and Shane, here's another argument I love to hear Marxists say when they try to pull the no true Scotsman. They always say, "Well, Lenin wasn't a communist because he betrayed the works of Marx and all that." I'm like, and where does it say that Marx can't be anarchist? You know, and he says, "Well, it's got to be a worker utopia where the workers communally share and own everything." Guess what? Marx didn't mind if it was a totalitarian government. In fact, he flat out said in several areas, you know, if there's a dictatorship, fine, as long as it's a dictatorship of the Communist Party, I'm okay with it.
In fact, there's not really any indication that he thought it could work as an anarchy.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I mean, you know.
Just saying. I can't
believe.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like really, they really hold on to Marx like as if he's some sort of holy gospel. You know, I love how Hoodie Demon said people saying that capitalism can't work or it does this because Marx said so in Das Kapital. That's like saying God and Jesus Christ exist because the Bible said so.
Speaking of Hoodie, where is that guy?
He's coming back. He's coming back. He's coming back this month.
There was this person on the Rubin Report, and I think that she explained it very well. It was Marx was one of the greatest social scientists ever to happen, but he got everything wrong.
Yeah.
Hey,
here's another thing here's a funny thing about Karl Marx. Not only were his ideas nowhere near revolutionary, because there were tons of people advocating for communist ideals long before Marx was even born, but also he was harshly criticized even by fellow leftists. You know, like there was I forgot his name. There was a guy in Germany who was a diehard leftist. He believed in welfare and all that, and even he agreed that Marx was crazy.
Well, yeah, Marx's ideas go all the way back at least to the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
But the only reason why...
Oh, sorry, Voltaire.
The only reason why Marx is so big now because he tried to make socialism scientific.
Yeah, he tried. Yeah, he was the guy, you know, he was the guy who was saying, oh, it's scientific, here's why, and he doesn't do that, you know what I mean? And here's the thing. Communism is partially the reason why a lot of Eastern Europeans are diehard creationists. It's not because they're primitive Neanderthals. It's because they grew up in their childhoods being told over and over again, communism is scientifically proven. It's the political idea of science. And then what happens when communism collapses and fails? They're thinking, oh, great. Well, what else have they lied to us about? You know?
Yeah.
It's because they're dumb. Because they're dumb Neanderthals. It's just because, you know, I don't blame them for thinking that way because they were lied to all their lives, so they don't trust anything anymore.
John Stossel uploaded a great video a few days ago for Reason TV, and it was this woman who grew up in communist China. Yeah, and she was like worshiping Mao, and Mao is perfect, and then all the bad things started happening, and starvation was like, wait a minute, maybe this guy isn't so good after all.
Yeah, you know, I mean...
It's called reality, my friends.
Yep.
And don't you find it odd that I'm busy weaving a story while you guys are busy talking about stuff? Or is it just me?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's pretty fun. And you know, and I will say this, Shane, the funniest thing ever when I talk about the no true Scotsman argument is I actually had a communist say, well, you libertarians pull no true Scotsman arguments all the time. Every time we show things like the Industrial Revolution and all the bad things that happened to the workers there, or Augusto Pinochet Chile, you're the ones pulling no true Scotsman. And I tell them this, yeah, because here's the thing. Libertarianism has a simple, easy philosophy. You have to violate it, which is the non-aggression principle. You're no longer a libertarian.
Yeah, no true Scotsman is only a fallacy if, you know, the person was actually like born and raised in Scotland. If the person's never been to Scotland, it's not a fallacy to say he's not a Scotsman.
Yeah, you know, I mean, yeah, you know, that's what the whole fallacy is. It's where, you know, it's actually contrary to popular belief. It's not actually from the porridge. Rather, it was from the guy who proposed it was an Englishman who was actually talking to a couple of Scottish friends, and they were talking about this one serial killer who was from England, and one Scotsman was saying, "Oh yeah, it begs me that an Englander would do such an atrocious act. Us Scotsmen would never do that." But then he's like, "But what about this guy? He was a serial rapist, and he was a Scotsman." And he replied, "Yeah, but he wasn't a real Scotsman." That's where the whole no true Scotsman thing came from. You know, actually, I will say that's so hilarious that every time a person responds by saying, "No, Stalin wasn't a real communist because he didn't collectively distribute the resources. He controlled them under central authority." I simply reply with, "Yeah, and it's also true that no true Scotsman puts sugar in his porridge."
Actually, there's been a lot of staring about due to Xeezy saying that Stalin was a capitalist, and people like the Finnish Bolshevik will correct him on that.
How the hell was Stalin a capitalist?
Because the means of production were still privately owned or something like that.
And
people are just so friggin' brainless.
And you want to know something? And you can actually read the actual things. There were many well-known communist philosophers in the 1920s and 30s who were praising Stalin. Like, there was this one British guy who was a diehard communist, and he said that Stalin was the way politicians needed to go.
It's not about, because people are saying this about Venezuela too, you know. Oh, it's not communism because 80% of industries are privately owned. It's not about whether some piece of paper says they're privately owned. It's about how much control they have over the decision making in those.
Am I even in the right universe? Am I even in the right universe where I hear about these things, guys?
And Shane, going back, the same thing happened in Nazi Germany. You know, people love to say, "Oh, but Nazi Germany wasn't capitalist because there were still privately owned companies for profit like Mauser, Krupp, and Rheinmetall." And I'm like, yeah, but here's the thing: there were laws in place, and the Nazis sent bureaucrats there to say, "Look, you can own the means of production, and you can make a profit from your earning under one condition." You are only allowed to make things that are necessary for the war. If you're making anything else, we're going to shut you down.
Hey, can I read extras from the Road to Serfdom?
Yeah, that's actually going back. That's actually why Hugo Juncker of the Juncker Industries was forced to resign was because Juncker was an engineer and he wanted to build planes that could take people across to different cheaper, and he was getting angry that the Germans were forcing his factory to build nothing but bombers.
Okay.
How long has it been since we've actually talked about Vegas?
About.
We're all over the place, man.
That's how Hangouts go. You never know.
Yep. For any of us who are new to Bıᴛᴇᴏ Hangouts, sadly, some of the older guys from the Bıᴛᴇᴏ aren't here anymore. 90% of the time, like the first 5 minutes, we talk about the subject we're trying to talk to, and by the end of it, we're usually talking about whatever. Like there was one time where we were talking about the origin of Thanksgiving, and like 10 minutes later, we were talking about people who believe in the flat Earth conspiracy.
Oh, and we always seem to make it to the Civil War somehow.
Yeah, that too. Yeah. It should be just like how there's a Godwin's Law. There should be a war for the Civil War too. Yeah.
Yeah, Bıᴛᴇᴏ law. Every Bıᴛᴇᴏ discussion at some point we'll talk about the Civil War.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Shane, and you officially got a law named after you on Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, I saw that. It's not quite exactly the way that I formulated it, but close enough.
Cool. It's basically a fancy way of calling someone a hypocrite, you know.
Well, it's just that if they identify themselves this way prominently, like, for, what Sargon of Akkad will later call virtue signaling, then it's less likely to actually apply to that person.
And the SJWs are a perfect example of that, especially some of those blacks, they're like, "Oh, but we was oppressed and we're being oppressed by the patriarchy," and they're going to a well-respected university and they're getting a subsidy and they have rich parents. Like there was that one, what was that guy's name? He was that one black guy and he formed like the student youth group of all blacks, and he was bragging about how he was oppressed as a child because he was black, and then some guys doxed his information and revealed he was actually the son of a really rich millionaire.
Oh, that was that guy at Mizzou.
The guy that said that there was an assassination attempt on him simply because some random guy tossed a piece of poo at him.
Yeah, the guy with the glasses.
Yeah, and they don't even know who the poo was aimed at. You know, for all we know, it could have just been aimed at the random person. But they're like, no, this proves that there's an attack on our group. Yeah.
Hey, are you gonna make a quickie on Hoodie's Law?
I might. In the next set, I'm doing one on Dr. Rowe's Law.
What's Dr. Rowe's Law?
Corey Dr. Rowe. It does something like if someone takes a piece of property that you own, lock it against your will, and don't let you have the key, they're not acting in your best interest. And he was talking about DRM, but I talk about a couple other things too.
Yeah.
Can I ask a Vegas-related question?
Sure.
What, you want to go back on topic?
How come it took like 70 minutes to tear down the guy's door?
That's my guess.
Because when seconds count, the police are just an hour and 7 minutes.
My guess is police bureaucracy. I mean, it's not just the police. There's actual accounts of fire departments not putting out fires, not because they don't have the tools of the mobilization, but because, you know, like there was that one incident, you know, in that one county where it's like, wait a minute, is this person in the county? Are we in the county, or should we get another county and all that? So they're sitting there watching the building burn, waiting for clearance, you know, from the state to say, yep, that building's within the county, you can put it out.
But there were people like who really early on had pegged the room it was coming from. I mean, I'm sure they didn't know the room number, but they were like, yeah, it's on that floor, that many windows over. So, I mean, they knew where it was coming from.
Yeah. And again, going back to what happened in Norway, you know, I mean, it was pretty clear that Breivik was on the island shooting people. Everyone was confirming it. The news was on there filming it. And yet the government ordered that every single police officer had to stay in Oslo and look for bombs, even though it was pretty clear there was no more bombs. And like, even if you did need someone to stay behind, they easily could have sent a team over to stop Breivik. But no, everyone had to be there because, oh, you got to protect your state buildings.
I hear a doggy.
Doggy, where is it?
Oh, that's my
Where
Zach.
is it? I want to pet it.
Oh, that's Zach. He's up in the kitchen. He wants his dinner.
Speaking of which, I'm pretty sure Shane and Pitspeak have already heard the story, but PETA recently posted an article criticizing the game Ark the Survival, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's a survival multiplayer game where you're on a stranded island like the Lost World from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and you can raise dinosaurs and saber-tooth tigers, you can ride on them, you can use them to hunt, and all that, and PETA was writing this article saying that it's a bad game because, you know, you're raising dinosaurs. But here's the thing, they weren't saying the idea of farming, they were actually saying you shouldn't be enslaving dinosaurs, as if the dinosaurs were real.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, PETA, you do realize that the dinosaurs in Ark Survival are just moving pictures. That's all they are. They're not real. Yeah,
sorry if you hear the doggo.
Yeah.
All right, 4 minutes left, and then I turn into a pumpkin. So get your parting shots in.
Wait, what?
Turning into a pumpkin? Why?
It's an expression. It means I have to leave.
Oh,
Fair enough.
okay.
All I gotta say, it's an honor being in my first live stream with you guys.
Yeah, great to have you here, Johnny.
Yep.
Thanks,
I just
Shane, you
joined
big
with the last-
softy.
Yeah, I just joined the last few 10 minutes, but nonetheless, it was a pleasure hearing y'all. So,
Hey, it's a man.
oh hey Voltaire, how you doing?
Sure, Pipsqueak, we can let you take a shot.
That's good.
Yeah, it always irritates me whenever anyone brings up, oh, Australian violent crime stats went down after the gun buyback. I've actually got the chart here. Kidnapping, abduction, and armed and unarmed robbery actually spiked after 1996 and didn't go down until after 2001.
Yep.
Yeah, they mentioned a lot of that
So
stuff in the fee article I mentioned.
That's actually another thing going back, and this was used to criticize Cuba when they say that their healthcare system works. Actually, it's actually also been shown that a lot of times when you see these low statistics in these one areas, it turns out that whenever you hear these international organizations doing the study, they don't actually go down there and research. They only take what the government tells them, and if you actually talk to what the people are saying, they actually say it's the exact opposite.
Well, knowledge this a priori.
Yeah.
All right, any parting shots before we call this one?
Yeah.
Well, I just like to say, Pierce, go into irrelevancy. We'll be waiting.
I will say one quick thing about Piers Morgan. When Piers Morgan went on that long rant, calling Americans stupid, because we have we allow people to be armed. There was actually a movement to deport Piers Morgan, and I think he is deported actually now. But there was a bunch of English people responding, "Please don't deport Piers Morgan. We don't want him back.
We don't want him back. You can have him."
Yeah, you can have him. We don't want him. And if you have to deport him, send him to Canada or something. We don't want him.
Canada, we don't want him.
All right, see you, Shane.
All right. Thank you very much.
It's been